Hey all, welcome. So Chris and I were both active in intentional community. This has a big influence on how both of us see the role of technology in all of this, in building meaning together, getting things done together, and institution design.
Yeah. And I think there's always an interesting contrast in approach between those who would look to the hard rules of institutional design, the kind of mechanistic design, and those who would look to something softer, something more values or virtues based.
For example, we often see the design challenge taken up by technologists who are interested in supporting democracy, supporting healthy governance. They often see it as, how do I design a good system that people will fit into well, robust to the worst person, and so on. So rarely do we see the design challenges. How do we design an institution that is effectively just watching what everyone's doing and support that? How do we design an institution that follows the group rather than defining the group or structuring it?
Right. Which also goes to what is the goal, or what is a community or an organization directed towards? The lower dimensional the measure of a desired outcome, the more likely you could have some kind of calculus of what is good. The more you could aim for some kind of optimization. The more you have a very high dimensional space of what is potentially good or what outcomes are, the less likely you are to be able to have that kind of mechanistic guidance towards what's desired. And the more it becomes the messy moral problem of making trade-offs between competing goods.
As much as especially advances in AI have made it possible to treat institution design as fundamentally open-ended, there's still a bias to treat voting as for example, as the fundamental unit of democracy, and voting as the problem to solve. You see it up and down DAOs. One way that Chris and I align is to see the intentional gathering as the fundamental unit of democracy. And when you change the unit you're designing for, you change everything. Okay, voting's a nice problem for computer scientists to approach. It has all these great security concerns that you can design for and around. And it's very amenable to the Machiavellian conception of institution design, which is to be robust, once again, to the worst person, be robust to the most awful person. So I have a beautiful cake, and look, this cake is full of spikes that only hurt bad people. Isn't that a great feature on a cake? It's how you think when your democracy design, your community design problem is framed fundamentally as an adversarial one, in which security, for example, is one of the core things you're focused on. When we get into intentional gathering as the fundamental unit of democracy, adversarial nature isn't one of the things you're leading with. You don't have to worry about spikes on a cake, and you are opening up to, well, what does everybody here need to build meaning more effectively together?
Well, if you look to the literature on like deliberative democracy, even that part of it on kind of agonistic democracy, where actually conflict is seen as at the heart of democracy, and yet what are the properties you're looking for to support that kind of democratic policy-making or decision-making? It's voting won't get discussed in that literature at all. It's all about certain virtues of public discourse, around the decisions that need to be made, the policies that need to be made. A discourse that needs to recognize, well, somehow has to overcome you've got to get losers' consent.
And you need a mutual assumption of good faith. Even when you have an adversarial setting or tone, which deliberation sets up great, you still have an agreed upon ground rules that you're no longer assuming with a lot of adversarial security first design.
Right. And, there's this balance between a decision needs to be seen as, on the one hand, it is binding. You can't ignore it because you don't like it or fail to respect that is indeed the decision. On the other hand, it needs to be seen as provisional. It won't be once and for all. There needs to be an orientation where there is conflict, where there are different interests that are in conflict. There needs to be an orientation towards, an open-mindedness, because there needs to be a hearing of what the other position is. It can't be dismissed as automatically not a moral position, not worthy of being in the discourse. But there needs to be an orientation towards recognizing the overlap and alignment, because in any contrasting, conflicting positions, there'll be quite a lot that is shared, even where there is also a lot that is different. And that's a stance you can take. If I choose to identify all the ways in which we disagree, fine, that's what we'll see. But if we choose also to emphasize where there is alignment, well, look, it turns out there'll be a bunch there, and this is kind of the raw material to work with in any kind of deliberative democratic decision making.
I like the focus on deliberation a lot because you're already seeing the AI space get influenced, informed, and excited about supporting deliberation, supporting facilitation. The idea being we can have AI facilitators, AI assistants who help people get into better arguments or learn things better, or suggest more humanistic prompts for discussion. But what if the point of deliberation, what if the point of facilitation is to do it? There's a whole set of skills. I don't hear anybody disputing that, hey, AI will be great for giving everybody some kind of personal note taker. No one's really in uproar on the labor side or ethics side about that. On the other hand, I haven't heard anybody say, public schools in America are funded a little bit by performance and attendance. Funding public schools is good. Humans are inefficient learners, especially young children. So what if we replace them all with agents to increase GPAs? And increase funding for public schools. We don't hear that because we understand that some things are about the point. Some things are about the output, some things are about the process. And I haven't heard the conversation in society about what work is about the process. You're starting to hear it now in arts, right? That a lot of the point of art isn't the output, and it's because of advances in image generation that made that conversation possible. But what about facilitation? What about deliberation? What about running a meeting? What about running a rewarding meeting, one that people enjoy? Running an intentional gathering that's energizing. What if the point of doing it is the process of doing it? What if everyday practice with democracy, getting our hands dirty in it, is the fundamental hygiene for being a responsible steward of large-scale democracy? Then what's the role of AI there?
Right. And, let me add something that is adjacent but relevant into the mix here, which could be, you talk about democracy, you can also talk about justice. And here, speaking as a lawyer, there's always this kind of tension between, on the one hand, substantive justice, and on the other hand, procedural justice. And there's something in how humans, societies have evolved systems of justice, that there's this recognition that you have to trade off some substantive justice in order to achieve something that has that can be more robust in a multi-interest environment, and that's a kind of fairness or procedural justice. But it's a real trade-off, and so I feel, well, and I could bring in something else to keep playing on this trend, this kind of tension between the process and aiming for the substantive outcome. I mean, if we look at, another great fruit of human civilization, like our systems of knowledge production, whether that's institutions of science or other. Again, there's what's key there is the process. It's those virtues or values that are seen as more likely to orient towards truth, that need to shape the institutional design and the values that are held in those. So this becomes I think a good theme when looking at AI and how we will begin to incorporate an interface with it. To what extent can it support our process as humans and individuals and societies, rather than simply kind of jumping us to the substantive outcome or answer that we're looking for?
Yeah. I mean, just like we haven't heard, hey, let's replace all grade schoolers with agents, I haven't heard, you hear this all the time in social work, that my job is to make myself obsolete. My job is to put myself out of a job, right? My job is to build capacity in my community or in the people I serve. Yeah. We're not hearing that from AI, and it's got to be in large part because that's a bad business plan. It's more of a civic technology perspective. But insofar as so much of what community institutions and collectives need is to be composed of experts in shared leadership, I'm more and more open to the idea that the role of AI in those contexts, the role of AI in anywhere where the process is what you're cultivating rather than the output, that the role of AI is to make itself obsolete by being such a good steward of its members, users.
Yeah. A guardrail for AI or for AI alignment is render your services obsolete in the most elegant way possible.
And look at us building so cleanly off of Wendy and Aya's subtraction. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How to do less? Well, it's not about maximizing one's own impact. It's about understanding what is trying to be served. And again, if that's seen as some kind of substantive outcome, there's some endpoint that's being driven towards. Okay, that'll take you one way, and then you should be very concerned about whether that outcome is really something you desire. If instead it's more of a process-based, and it is going to be easier to incorporate more of a values-based, more of a virtue-based kind of moral framework where one is process-oriented rather than outcome-oriented.
I guess to make it you run an you're a co-founder of an eco-village in Portugal. I learned so much about chickens from Chris, the community within the community, and all of the, it's nice being able to be an observer of a smaller chicken community's drama as you're navigating your own. I imagine it gives one lots of design. So if you could just snap your fingers and have a lot of technologies available to your community as it navigates building meaning among everybody and making better decisions as a group than it could as a set of individuals. How would you put a lot of these, our shared ideas into practice?
Right. The first thing I'd want would be support for process, because this is something that it isn't intuitive. Like, let's say there's some kind of conflict or dispute. Like, unless you have a bunch of lawyers or otherwise involved in dispute resolution somehow, it's not going to be instinctive what those kind of principles of natural justice are. Like what the right kind of steps or process would be to not just to get to a place of potential resolution that is from a kind of legal or moral perspective fair, but also one that is psychologically acceptable and satisfying to those involved. So that these are expert domains. They're not something which is likely to emerge from us gathering as a community with starting from scratch and trying to figure it out for ourselves. And so that kind of process support, being guided through a fair process for resolving a conflict, for instance, that would be immensely valuable. It's hard to find, and often in community, those with those kind of mediatory skills or whatever are super precious, precisely because it's not obvious, and yet it makes a big difference.
I guess this is just the beginning of how design changes when we're focused, when we shift our attention from a good output to the work involved in cultivating better humans. Thanks so much. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.